Thank you for the first ever DVS webinar hosted by myself. I have a chat moderator called Reese, so everybody say hello to Reese.
Hi guys.
He's one of my tech guys, really good at his job. If you've got any questions, please type them in the chat, and rather than myself being distracted, Reese is going to take any notes, get back to you if we need to get back to you with any questions we can't answer here. I've muted everybody. I'd rather you focus on me and the screen rather than everybody jumping in trying to chat. This is the first webinar, so we'll see how it goes. It may change format as we move forward. It's starting to warm up in here now, so I'll take off my jacket. The purpose of the webinar is to run through the first one for sure, is to run through the Deep in Mind Perimeter Protection NVR. This is a device, a 9000 series or a 7000 series recorder, where we can monitor external cameras or internal, if you like, for perimeter protection for the purposes of false alarm reduction using analytics. Really, really popular device. The problem we come across in the technical side after sales is the fact that a lot of people don't understand how the technology works, how to set it up, and how to get the best out of it. So today we'll run through what I perceive sort of best practice. We have a certified Hikvision guide, which we can send to all of you after the webinar. We've got all of your email addresses, so don't fear. Any of the information that you'll see here, we will be able to pass that over to you, as well as the video itself. This is being recorded in the cloud, so we'll be able to send you a recording of that for your own review purposes at any time. So the Deep in Mind product itself, two versions of Deep in Mind. We've got the perimeter protection, which we're focusing on today, and the facial recognition NVR, which we won't be focusing on today. So within the guide itself, which I will send you, it does run through briefly how to set up an accurate perimeter guarding system with the Deep in Mind NVR. So it gives you a basic introduction, which we'll run through. I just want to show you what the guide looks like so you understand what you will be receiving. The false alarm reduction technique, how it works, what it does, and how it looks within the menu structure. So it is quite a good guide. It also tells you sort of how to configure the camera as in height, the distance you can expect to cover with a camera. The maximum distance we can detect with an optical camera is 50 meters. At 50 meters, I'd say the accuracy will go down drastically. That's a long way away depending on the lens size you use. So you can see the distances there. They've given a rough estimation, 50 meters using a 12 mil. If you're using a 2.8 to 2.8 mil lens, 50 meters is not going to be achievable. But we will send this guide. It will sort of start to make sense, and you get a lot of information within there. This is quite critical, this guide. Whenever we announce this technology to a customer, or certainly when I work with a customer, I send them this guide first so they have a better understanding of the technology. A lot of the problems arise from the customer's expectation compared to what we can actually deliver to the customer. So if we take it that the false alarm reduction NVR is very good at reducing false alarms from analytics, not eliminating them altogether. So as a benchmark, when the technology is deployed correctly, we can achieve sort of around the 85, even a little bit higher % reduction in false alarms. So if you're receiving 1,000 alarms a night, which is not uncommon from a standard CCTV system using whether it's analytics, PIRs, or motion detection, we can drastically reduce that number of false alarms that are sent to the monitoring station or the customer by deploying this technology. But we have to be clear, the expectation is sort of 85% as it stands currently, that we can deliver a not 100% reduction in false alarms, just to be clear on that. What you'll find with this technology, there are two variants. There are other people who do this technology. Some people do this within the cloud. We do it within the hardware itself. It's GPU led. It uses an NVIDIA GPU, which is embedded into the recorder itself. The purpose of that is we analyze the video feed directly from the camera for the human or vehicle detection, check to see if it's a valid alarm. If we think it's valid, we'll do the linkage action that's associated with that. If we think it's false, we do nothing with it and we discard it. Again, there is that 25%, 15%, whatever the however we set that up. There will never be 100%. Let's just say that. So, but we'll go through the setup and you'll sort of get a better understanding on that. Just trying to think if there's anything I missed out that's quite key at this point. It is all in the guide. Another common thing that we come across is the resolution restriction. So down at the bottom of the guide, right at the bottom, it should tell us what that restriction is. It's basically 8 channels, so 16 channels at 1080p. So if you go and put 16 4K cameras on there, that's absolutely fine. You won't get 16 channels at 4K to be able to be monitored for the VCA detection. So it's 16 channels at 2 megapixel, 8 channels at 4 megapixel, and 4 channels at 8 megapixel, if that makes sense. So the total is 32, however you split that up. That's quite critical. We have a lot of people who do go and put 16 4K cameras because their perception is the better the image, the better the VCA will work. That's not actually true. We're not looking for specific details as we are as a human with our eye optically. We're looking for metadata within that image and database references. So 2 megapixel, it performs at its full 16 channel capacity, and the resolution goes higher, it reduces that count. In some instances, we've had to deploy multiple machines to get this working across the site because it's larger than the 16 channels that we can actually do. That's not a problem. You can put more than one machine on the site at that time. Another thing we can't do is H.265+. That causes a lot of problems outside of this technology, but the H.265+ isn't supported. It's just H.264 and H.265+, which is still more than adequate. It's also one line or one intrusion box to cover the area you want. So if you deploy a high-end camera, so a 5-line, 7-line that's got more than one line and more than one area, within the technology on the NVR, we can still only use one area and one line. We can use them both together. What we can't do is use 4 lines and 4 areas within the same present in the camera. Once we enable the smart analysis on the recorder, the video processing is done on the GPU itself on the recorder and nothing to do with the camera. So another common misconception of this technology is if we deploy this NVR-based technology, we can then go and deploy the 7-line product, which has got the deep in-view technology in there, and it becomes a double knock effect. That's not true. If you deploy a 7-line camera, the image quality will be absolutely fantastic because it's a true darkfighter image, so that's great. You won't make use of any of the additional benefits that are embedded on the camera. It doesn't take the feed from the camera. It's done on the video processing on the chip itself on the NVR. So you don't need to go and deploy the 7-line product and this NVR. What we do recommend is this camera will work with any of the technologies we sell. So a 2-line, 4-line, 5-line, 7-line, 8-line, whatever that may be. Technically, you don't need any of the higher products. What we do say is if realistically you want the best possible nighttime image, you should look at True Darkfighter, and that will now be the 5-line product. The Powered by Darkfighter is still very, very good at nighttime, so you can still use the Powered by Darkfighter, but it really is, if the image is going to go into IR mode, then you could get away with a standard 2-line product because the IR mode in both technologies is very similar. But if you are going to keep the technology in color using the Darkfighter technology, we urge you to use the 5-line product for the best image performance. And that will not only give you the best image on playback for evidential purposes, but you'll also get the best out of it analytic wise as well. So that's just a little side note. So this is the guide which you'll receive after we finished. We also do a dedicated ARC firmware. For those of you that want to use it with an ARC, we do a special firmware. Here, the release notes, again, we'll send that to you. This ARC firmware works really well when it's monitored by an ARC, hence the name ARC. When the email is received into the IMIX or Sentinel system, we actually put the VCA detection box around the target, whether it's a vehicle or a human, so the operator at the ARC end will quickly see it and be able to identify whether it's a true or false alarm after we've processed it. So we will only send what we believe to be a true alarm, but the operator's attention is quickly drawn to the area around with the red box highlighting that movement. So again, we've added that benefit for the ARC. Each picture is 1080p resolution, the center, so they get a lot more detail in there, and we send 3 snapshots. It's also got the arm disarm firmware in there, so the 1 key disarm, which is present in all our baseline firmware, has been carried over. So input 1 on our NVR enables you to set the CCTV system via the intruder alarm or a simple key switch or whatever method you come up with at that time. We will send you these notes and a link to the firmware. We also have the dual SMTP path in there. So for those monitoring stations that require the dual SMTP path for redundancy, we also have that available in the ARC firmware. And we also support the 1901 16-channel alarm expansion board, allowing the total number of alarms on the NVR to be 31. It's 32, but alarm input 1 is the arm disarm, so you actually get 31 usable alarms. So we'll send you the link to this as well, and a link to the software. They're the supported models. Like I said, we're now on the B model, which is the improved hardware, and that's what we'll be focusing on today, is the 9.6 series, but we also do it in the 7.7 series as well for a more cost beneficial system. Everybody okay with that so far? Just nod, say yes, and Reese will tell me that we can move on. The first person to say yes. Brilliant. Thanks, Josh. Okay, so we're going to log into my NVR here. We've deployed this across our car park. I actually monitor this. It's monitored by an ARC remotely for key holder response, but I actually monitor it myself for false alarms. So I'm actually probably a little bit quicker to react to anything that comes through. So I will just quickly log us into our recorder. No peeping at my password. Okay, so this is the baseline firmware. I'm not using the ARC firmware on this. This is the latest 4.1.70 firmware. I didn't need the ARC firmware. I have PIRs connected to this as well, so I was absolutely fine with the baseline, so it's a personal decision. So under configuration, we'll send you a link to the latest baseline firmware and the ARC firmware, as well as the specialized IVMS 4200 version, which allows you to search for false alarms to see how the system is performing, because that's quite critical when you're off-site. When you're local on-site, on the local GUI menu, you're able to search for false alarms to see how the system is reacting, because you may need to make some changes to the analytic area, sensitivity, etc. When you're remote from the site, the only way we can do that is not through the web browser currently, but we use a customized version of IVMS 4200 to check the performance, and we'll show you that before we finish. So you can see here, it's the 96000B version, and that's my latest firmware, which I updated yesterday. Moving on, most of you will understand the Hikvision web browser interface. That's the only interface I can show you today. I can't show you the local GUI side because we're hosting a webinar. If you need anything on that, I have done a separate video, which we can send, which is already on YouTube, which does run through the menu choice a little bit more than we can focus on today. Most people use the web browser for configuration. It's quicker, easier, and much quicker for us guys to be able to support you. Okay, so some little things we need to work to go over. The live view settings, you can actually adjust them on our latest baseline firmware for our I-series recorders. You can actually remotely adjust what the customer sees on their HDMI, VJ, or CVBS monitor, should you have anything connected. So from this live view settings, you're able to adjust any of those parameters for the customer. You used to have to send an engineer when the customer wanted to see certain camera layout. Now you can do that remotely. We've incorporated that into our baseline firmware, even on this one. Under maintenance, on the IDS range, you'll see a filtered alarm statistic tab. Now this is really handy. What you can do is enable all of the cameras that you want to be able to send you a report. So for me as an engineer or the installer, perhaps, I can actually tick all of my cameras that have got the detection target enabled. And as a snapshot, it tells me which of these cameras I've already enabled human and vehicle detection on. And you can choose whether it's human, vehicle, or both. I've done both on most of them. You tick the appropriate cameras. You tell it how often you want the report. So every day or every 7 days, and click save. What that will do now is, once I set an email up in the system under the email setting, providing it's not to an ARC, because if you're using an IMIX integration, they use a virtual email service. So it's very difficult then to get an email outside of the NVR. But this recorder, I can actually send myself a report based on the time period I set there. That will tell you how many alarms you've had received into the recorder from each camera and how many of those were false alarms. So it's a really quick snapshot to see the level of performance of the recorder. You get no images or video with that. It's just a same plain, simple text email that gives you that data. And I find that quite powerful, but that is where you set that up in the menu. By default, it is off, and it's up to you whether you use it, but I find it quite a powerful feature. Moving on, we're not going to run through too much of that. So there's the camera management. So you can see I've got quite a few cameras added to this machine. So 28 cameras of varying degrees, a lot of them in brand new technologies. Under VCA configuration, what it's telling me here is the engine is running, so it's normal. So I know that there's not a fault with the engine, the GPU chip itself. It's set up for perimeter protection, and I've got 7 channels linked to the recorder. So I'm able to link 16 channels to this recorder. So I've got 7 of the 16 linked. The maximum number of channels is 80. We're going to adjust that on the next firmware to reflect the unit count. So if it's a 32, it will be 32. And outside of the 16, what you can do, although I don't really suggest you do this, if you're using a camera like a 4-line, 5-line, 7-line, 8-line, the VCA technology within those cameras are able to send a VCA snapshot to our recorder for us to analyze after the fact. You don't get the same level of performance as if you do when the NVR GPU chip does it itself. So it's not a technique we openly push, but we have been in instances where we've had to use the camera itself, send the VCA from the camera to the NVR, and we do analysis after the fact because the camera's already done some of that analysis for us, but it isn't a technique we push. You don't get the same level of reliability or effectiveness, let's just say that. So, but it is possible to do that as a side note. Okay, and the network, we'll miss the network settings. So again, let's just choose, all of these, again, make sure you're using H.264 or H.265+. You can use OnVIF or RTSP streams if you wish, but again, we'd much rather you use a Hikvision product. We're going to jump straight into the setup of the analytic itself. But to do that, we go straight down into the event and we go straight to smart event. Wait for it to catch up. There we go. So let's pick a camera outside that I don't have it enabled on, or definitely the one we can play with, the 2H45. So this is a new camera I fitted this morning outside in preparation, a 4 megapixel powered by Darkfighter varifocal turret. So I swapped it to sort of the go-to product, which most people are using. A 4 megapixel, you get 8 channels, but you can reduce a 4 megapixel down to 2 megapixel to get this technology to work. What I would say is if you are going to deploy this technology, you need to think about camera location and camera type. I wouldn't use a dome externally as my go-to preference. We all know the image issues you can get, not only from the IR, but from the dirt, etc., rain, etc., gathering on the bubble itself. That does cause a lot of effect on the VCA engine. So for me, my first choice would be a bullet camera. You get much less issues using bullet cameras. Then it would be a turret outside of that. A dome, not my preference, but you can use it if you like. But again, we can help you here make a sensible camera choice at that time. I wouldn't use a PTZ. We have tested it with PTZs, but because a PTZ is movable, the engine doesn't work that well. As you move it, the activations go spurious. You'll get a lot of false alarms as the PTZ is in action. But if it's in a resting place, so the PTZ 99% of the time is just on a park preset, and an operator can use it. You can use it as long as you realize when you take control, there's a very high chance you'll get a lot of spurious alarms based on that movement. So the first thing you need to do is enable local smart analysis. Now, by enabling that, that's telling the NVR that this video channel is going to be monitored by the GPU chip. By turning it off, I'll just show you. It says here, supported smart events will be changed to whatever the camera supports. So if I click OK on that, these now, because I've turned enable local smart analysis off, these events will be pushed to the camera. So I set it up here and it will be pushed to the camera and it will rely on the camera to do that analysis and send it back to me. So it's whatever the camera is capable of doing, that's what the NVR will receive. So that's in our dumb listening mode, for want of a better word. This technology, you purchase it to use enable local smart analysis. That's what we're here for. So we're going to enable that. That will then limit what we can do with the technology. Like I said, now we're down to one area and one line. So we've got scene change detection. And by the way, you can use multiples of these on the same camera. So if I liked, I could set all of these up on the same camera and it doesn't reduce the resource or the unit's capability. So I can use one area, one line, region entrance, region exit, etc. So that's also fine. You can use multiples from the same camera. Let's go to intrusion detection. What I might do is just make this screen a little bit bigger just by zooming in slightly. Wait for that to catch up. No, now I've done that. Let's go back into it. Live demos. Who would do them? I was just trying to make it a little bit larger for you guys to see from here, but that'll do. So under intrusion detection, go back to my camera, 2H45. So we enable the technology, enable local smart analysis. We enable intrusion detection, and then we simply choose whether you want human and vehicle detection. If you want both, for instance, this is a car park, there's a likelihood that a vehicle could come into this compound, either through the gate or through the fence, then I would enable the vehicle detection. If you're not interested in vehicle detection, you don't have to tick that. So we're going to enable both human and vehicle detection, and we're going to click save. As you can see there, there's only one area. You don't get the drop down for 2, 3, 4. Next part, we need to draw the applicable area. So we select draw area, and we're going to draw a nice area to cover the whole compound. We'll just move it. I tell you what, let's clear it. Do that. And we'll do it like this. So you can draw multi-pointed shapes. So we've covered basically the whole compound there, and we're going to click stop drawing. The threshold is, I get a lot of questions on what this threshold value means. The threshold value is the time an object has to remain inside this area before the alarm is triggered. So it's like a pre-alarm time. So currently it's set to 2 seconds. If I wanted, I could drag it up to the maximum of 10 seconds and click save. So an object entering from outside of this area into this area would have to remain in there for 10 seconds or more before the linkage action is continued. It's really good for reducing false alarms. It's also good if you've got birds flying through, dogs, cats, whatever, flying through the image. That will reduce the amount of false alarms that could be potentially seen from moving objects through the field of view. So 0, if you leave it at 0, that's an instant alarm. As soon as an object that they think is a human or vehicle enters this area, it will go into alarm instantly. But I tend to use the default of 2 seconds, which I find is really good at being the highest percentage of false alarm reduction. But again, you can put it from 0 to 10. That really is site applicable and what you think will perform best in that instance. Hang on, sorry. I've got a bad chest today. So I don't know if any of you noticed, but I'm sitting in a position where that little hat goes above my head, which is quite comical, I guess. So the 10 seconds for the threshold, you adjust that, but we'll put that back down to 2. That is what I tend to use as my default setting. And the sensitivity, we started at 50%, but again, you can lower that or make it higher depending on how sensitive you need that area to be. And the sensitivity really is how much of the object needs to go into that area before you then say that is an object. If it's 0, it's straight away, or we start the countdown timer. We recommend you start at 50 and then work up or down from that. So we're going to leave that at 50%. Then you can do your arming schedule. So if you're not using the arm disarm by input 1, you can use a timed arming schedule. So you know the site's open and close between a certain time every day. You set your arming schedule to be applicable to that. If you're using the 1-key disarm, leave that as 24/7, which it is by default, and then it will follow the arm disarm from the input 1. The linkage method is what you want this to do when it's in alarm. Audible warning is the local NVR making a horrendous sound. Send email. So if you're using it with IMIC, Sentinel, or personal monitoring and you want that to send an email, you tick that option. Notify surveillance centers. That would be a push to the Hike Central, IMS 4200, or even Hike Connect app. So that would be that. And then full screen monitoring. Really not applicable for out of hours monitoring because it makes the local HDMI screen go full screen on that camera. If it's an area that's a secure area, there's a guard monitoring it, may be very applicable to that. But for outside monitoring using arm disarm, not really applicable. You choose what the action would be, whether it's from the alarm outputs, if you want to associate any alarm outputs, that is. So you may want to, we have a common one where we have a specific customer who uses this technology. When a vehicle or a human is detected in an area, they trigger an output on the camera, which then drives the light circuits, or the lights come on. So it's quite a nice deterrent, but you can be very inventive with that. And by default, we always trigger that camera recording, but you can change that should you need. Also, if you require, on VCA events, you can link a PTZ. So choose the applicable PTZ, choose the preset. So when this VCA goes in, an overview PTZ can turn around and monitor it from an overview perspective rather than just a close-up field of view. Again, a lot of people do that, and it's entirely up to you whether you choose to or not. So I'll just save that for now. Same process. So we've set this area up here. There's also a minimum and maximum object size filter built into this. So what I tend to do, and again, personal preference, and I find this works best, I personally, when I start setting a site up for a customer, I tend not to use maximum and minimum object size from the start. I put that in should it be over alarming due to whatever reason. Because what you'll find is sometimes you get a big collection of water in the, say the car park. This is a very good example. In our car park, sometimes we get a big puddle of water here after heavy rain, and that car reflection in the puddle can cause false alarms. So I use minimum and maximum object size to sort of drive that away slightly, and it does really work. But I tend not to use it from the start, and I use it after, should we get a lot of problems with false alarms, to fine tune the system. But the simple fact is this: you select maximum object size. Now, the maximum object size is probably going to be a large, or a majority of the screen, because you don't know what that maximum object size would be when the alarm goes off. And what you have to remember is minimum and maximum object size can really help you, but it can create another issue where a spider on the lens can be that big, so at the maximum size, but a human in the distance can be that big. So there is a point where the minimum maximum object size really does help, but it can also hinder the performance of the system. So again, by default, I try not to use it, check the performance, and then use it where applicable. I think Reese has got a question. He's looking at me. He's put his hand up. Can I zoom in a little bit? Yeah, I can. Let me zoom in. Is that better?
Yeah, it's much better.
Okay. So you can see there from the minimum and maximum object size. So for instance, I can draw this, drag it around, I can actually just make that full screen. So anything within the screen, the maximum object size is that. Now, minimum object size, to eliminate sort of false alarms from things like birds, dogs, foxes, rats, rabbits, things like that, shadows, light reflections, which can all affect analytics. To give a further level of reduction, you can use minimum object size and pick something quite small. So I know this wheel, for instance, is quite small, so I can put it around that. So now by clicking save, the object has to be either classified as a human or vehicle by our technology, which we're always trying to analyze and do, but also between the pixel sizes, because this will go on pixel size, between the minimum and maximum object size. So you can really filter out, but you can also make it more false alarm by using it. So you have to be a little bit careful, the minimum, maximum. Try it without and then apply it where necessary. You might find you've got some cameras need it, some don't. Okay, so everyone should be happy with that now. I think we're okay with that. Reese is giving me a little nod. Thank you, Reese. So line crossing, again, very similar. I'll not go through every single analytic because the principle is the same. Again, if I want to use line crossing, simply enable it, human or vehicle, draw my area. I already did one this morning, wherever that may be. Select A to B or whatever that monitoring direction, because you can do it by direction, and then the sensitivity, and click save. And then the same for the arming and linkage method. So you go through the analytic like that. With line crossing, there isn't a threshold time. You can't stand in a line for a preset time. So it's as soon as you go across the line, we'll detect it. The line crossing works really well on sort of gates, entrances, and along fence lines. intrusion areas work really well in this instance where you've got an open space. So you can mix and match the technology. So I could have one across the gate, on the fence, and really depending on the application and the field of view, but you can use them. But line crossing really does work better. Sort of fence line, external perimeter, and gates, driveways, etc. And intrusion more for an open space. And then you've got the region entrance and region detection. So is everyone quite happy with how you set that up? It's not really any different to our standard analytics setup. So if you've done that, or if you've used this technology, you'll see how easy this technology is to deploy. It isn't rocket science. You okay with this? Reese is giving me a nod, thank you. Okay, so past that, we've got the storage. So I don't really need to go too much into that, but you've set the applicable storage. We've got backup settings, so you can have an automated backup if needed. Vehicle detection, so this will do all of the standard functions the I-series recorders will do. So you've still got ANPR, depending on the technology that you're deploying. So if you use an ANPR camera, you can still use ANPR, you can still use thermal, you can still use heat mapping, you can still use people counting. So all of that is still enabled within our product set. So it's not by this IDS for perimeter and having to buy a separate system to include all of the other technologies. That really is down to the end device, the front end device as we call it, that you deploy at that time. Another common misbelief is the VCA. So if you're using thermal cameras, which I do have on board, let me just pick one of my thermal cameras. I think that's the thermal one. So that is the thermal image. So I've got one of the bi-spectrum thermal cameras fitted to this recorder. So it's a low-res thermal image with a day-night camera. If you deploy thermal cameras, it doesn't take up a channel on the IDS alarm filtration side. So you could have 16 channels of optical, day-night optical images being analyzed for false alarm, and you could have 16 thermal images being analyzed by the recorder. The thermal analysis is done within the thermal camera. It's most of the, or a lot of our modern thermals are GPU led, or if they're not got the GPU because you don't have the V version, they definitely have the deep in view firmware. Analytics on the thermal are very, very stable. It's something that we try to promote heavily because we have such great results from them. There's a big product range in thermal. If you need to speak to us separately on that, please do. But we can help specify the correct thermal lens resolution and monitor, depending on the detection distance that you need to get at that time. We'll help you do that. But as a note, we don't take up a channel by using thermal. The thermal technology will do the analysis. It will send us the alarm. You can set it up within the recorder itself. So we've got like an area here, and it takes it away from the recorder. So you can have 16 and 16. In that instance, you would have 32 VCA channels on the recorder, because 16 on the end device of the thermal and 16 within the camera done on the NVR itself. So you're not limited in that respect. On the earlier versions, it was very different. On this second generation, we've taken that need away. And then the human body capture, I'm not going to show you that. You need a special device. It looks like RoboCop. There's a human body capture camera. It's got like a 110-degree view with a PTZ underneath. It zooms around, taking images and sending them to us to analyze. It's a very specialist technology and not one that we'd look to deploy. And in fact, I don't think we sold much of it, so it'd be a waste of mine and your time. Are we happy to move on? No questions? So Reese is saying no questions. That's good. I'm glad you're still engaged. So if we go into playback, again, just to show you, there isn't the function. Whilst we can play back any standard recording or if you've got event recording, we'll be able to play that back. What we can't do is look for false alarms, which is very beneficial for you guys externally, like I said. So what we're going to do quickly is load the IVMS 4200 software that includes this function. I've already added the NVR to it, so it'll make the process quicker. Wait for that to load. Currently, it is an older version because of the customize function, but we're hoping to put that in a later version very soon. Nearly. I can hear you vigorously typing away there, Reese.
The firmware version.
Okay.
The software version.
So for those of you that want to see the software version, that's the software version. We'll send a link to download this from our Dropbox, but that is the version that we use to do this false alarm search. So the simple process is this. So within Control Panel, the first thing we have to do is add our device, which I did yesterday in preparation for this. Within Control Panel, you have to go to Selecting Modules, and we have to enable the Behavior Analysis module, which I did yesterday. It's there. We select Behavior Analysis, and there's a tick box for false alarms. So we're going to tell the recorder to show us any of the incidents that would have false alarms in there, so we can see how the system is performing. So for instance, if we take one, let's take this one here, click false alarm, choose the time and date. So we'll do it maybe from beginning of last week and click search. So this one had a bit of a water problem, let's just say. So you can see, if I click on there, if I just move myself out of the way because my thing's there. If I click on an image, it gives you the image of the false alarm. So that's my line crossing there. All of this rain has caused the analytic to play up. And again, this is quite a good example of why a dome is not really the best technology to deploy, because it sticks to the lens. I've changed that camera this morning. It's a turret now, so the dome is actually gone. Even though it does say 2835, it wasn't a turret because we changed it to see what the performance was like. So if I click play, I can actually see the related video with that. If the video is in the recorder, you'll see the related video and image. So it gives you a really good indicator of what kind of false alarms you're experiencing and how you can combat them. Because this may be, you need to adjust the area, sensitivity, threshold, move the line, clean the camera. So it's a very, very good support tool. So that's just an example of one of the cameras that had a rain issue, let's just say. But again, I can select any of the cameras and do that review. So I could click, I don't know if I got it enabled on that one. Let's just try all of it. No. And this is where I can't remember where the false alarms are, but I think that's the main one. Was that one? Again, there's two on this one. So if I click on there, you can see there's a vehicle outside the compound there. It's detected that. If you look at the playback image, the vehicle is in there. The green boxes come into our detection box, so the timer started. Again, that's what's caused the alarm. But our recorder knows that's a false alarm, so it's rejected any of the linkage actions. But again, it's a really good way of us seeing how the unit is performing. I've got to put my hand on heart here. I monitor this regularly, and I struggle to find false alarms on there. I've shown you some from the last 2 weeks. That's just a quick example of what false alarms I'm seeing over a 2-week period on some of the cameras. But it isn't the level I expected when I deployed the technology. So I'm really, really pleased how this performs. The customers we've deployed this to give us very, very good feedback. And whilst we do still have to meet the customer's expectation, we know a lot of this technology is out there and the customer feedback has been very, very good. But you do need to pay a little bit of time and attention to the detail of how you deploy it, the field of view, the camera choice, and also how you set that analytic up. I would say you need 2 people to test this correctly. You need one at the front end looking at it, seeing how it's performing. You need at least one person out on the site moving around, seeing what the detection's like. Trying to do it with one person would become quite difficult because you have to keep checking, going back checking. It will definitely extend that period. So I would definitely urge you to look at possibly having 2 people to do that checking and setting up. Other than that, so that's the behavior. That's how we can check for false alarms, but we will send you that information later. I'm trying to think now. I'm just going to look at Reese and think, is there anything else that you can think of from a technical perspective that we need to discuss that we get asked all of the time on these recorders?
One of the common things we get asked is how to reduce false alarms.
Okay.
So this helps with that.
So this is, again, Reese said one of the things he gets asked a lot on tech is how to reduce false alarms. This is one of those techniques. So deploying this technology, but spending the time to do it correctly. If you don't do it correctly, you won't get the results you expect, and you'll get an angry customer, you'll be angry with us, and we'll all fall out. Not, we won't fall out, but you get the idea. Another common question I get asked is the difference between the IDS technology and the AccuSense technology. For those of you that know what the AccuSense technology is, we do have an AccuSense recorder. We're not pushing it into the UK. The performance of this product is very good in comparison to AccuSense. So we're not pushing the AccuSense recorder into the UK because the IDS is a lot better. The AccuSense technology is a halfway house between the standard VCA that you contain within the two-line product and the IDS technology that we're demonstrating here. So if you want a cost-effective false alarm reduction system, you can deploy an AccuSense camera. The technology is in the camera. It isn't as good as the IDS range, but it will be better than the standard analytic and give you a halfway house between the two. What you have to remember is the IDS is quite costly compared to a standard product, but you pay a little bit more for the AccuSense. You get an amazing image quality with the new 8 megapixel AccuSense range powered by Darkfighter. Many of you may have seen the video we published this week. Very, very good image quality, and it does improve the VCA alarms externally for sure. But the IDS is where the real technology is. So if you want this level of reduction for monitor systems, I urge you to go for the IDS rather than the AccuSense technology, but you can use AccuSense. If you use an AccuSense camera, again, the technology is in the camera, so you don't need to enable the channel on the NVR. If you enable it on the NVR, the AccuSense technology becomes worthwhile in the camera. Another thing with AccuSense, while you're on the subject, is on the camera, it either does motion or it either does VCA. It does not do both. We get quite a lot of feedback where customers go to enable the VCA analytic on the AccuSense camera, but they also want motion because they want it for motion recording rather than VCA recording or something like that, or they use motion for an alert process, which many ARCs don't accept anyway. But you can't do both. You have to do one or the other when using a standard recorder with AccuSense. The reason they do that is because they believe the AccuSense technology, VCA, has moved on a lot since the standard VCA technology in the standard two-line product. So they've turned motion off to urge you to go for the VCA. If you want motion, that's fine. You switch the operating mode within the camera menu, just as a little side note for those of you that are interested in AccuSense. There's a question. Okay, there's some questions.
If you use AccuSense cameras and DeepInMind together, will the results be better?
It won't. If you use AccuSense and DeepInMind together, just as I stated then and at the beginning, the results are not better. It's down to once you enable the technology on the NVR, the IDS, is that what you're saying when you use IDS and AccuSense together? Yeah. So the technology is on the NVR. So if you enable the NVR local smart analysis, the AccuSense technology becomes redundant on the camera because we're doing the video processing on the chip on the NVR and not on the camera. So if you deploy AccuSense, you don't really need to in that instance. Well, you don't make any benefit of the AccuSense technology. What you will benefit from is the very, very good 8 megapixel image or 4 megapixel image if you go for the 4 megapixel image. So you do get the powered by Darkfighter clean image. So you would benefit from that, but not the VCA side. Is there another question?
There's loads of questions.
Loads of questions. It's like mastermind.
Can you configure the email notifications any differently compared to a standard NVR? For example, can you include short video clips or control the size and number of images sent?
So we currently don't configure the email notifications any differently on the IDS to any of our standard product range, and we definitely do not contain video clips. Big reason why. When we send video, most of the video we send, because a lot of people are moving to the higher resolution images, one, we can't compress it before we send it on our product. We can't zip it to send it. And two, most email hosts won't accept the zip file, and they definitely don't like exe files. And they also have an inbound limitation of 10 meg. Most of you that know video, 10 meg fills up very quickly with high resolution video. So the purpose of not sending video is quite clear. We have looked at other options, and there may be something available in the not too distant future. I'm not going to say any more than that, but there will possibly be an interface that we can send video from the device as well as the email notification, but that's being worked on rather than deployed currently. So yeah, the answer in short is no, the email configuration is exactly the same on this product as any of our others, and we don't send video. We also don't send, we can't adjust the length of the video clip, the small, the image size that it sends to the ARC. The only exception is the ARC firmware, where it sends a higher quality image to the ARC. I hope that answers the question anyway. Another question?
Yeah. With the dual SMTP settings,
yes.
Can you configure the alerts? So one goes to the ARC and another to the office?
Not currently, because when I've tried it, it didn't work. I've taken a Wireshark and I'm going to try and get that adjusted. Currently, when you enable SMTP1, they kind of use the same process. So I get the thinking on it, but it didn't work when I tried it, but it is being looked at right now. I think we'll be able to get that resolved very quickly. So yeah, the hoping in that is yes, we'll be able to do it, but that's only on the ARC firmware. The standard non-ARC firmware doesn't have dual SMTP, so we wouldn't get the external email in that instance.
Yeah. Okay. A couple more.
Okay.
What's the main difference between 7.7 series and 960 combined NVRs? And what models do we have available in the UK? So
we sell the deep in mind recorders. We sell there's actually 4 models available. The 9000 series and the 9000 series and the 7000 series in the the updated hardware version. We sell both of those in stock with DVS now. The difference being the 9000 series has hot swap hard drives, ability to do RAID, dual LAN, that's 2 HDMI, 2 VJ, BNC if you need it. So kind of really it's a server rack. So you put it in there, you have the hot spare, RAID, dual LAN, etc., dual operating system. The 7000 will perform the same. It has the same level of analytics. There's no difference in how the analytics perform, and you can put the same number of analytics on both 7.7 and 9000. But really, the 9000 has that extra ability for the, that centrally deployed architecture, really. That's it. With the 7000, you have to take the lid off and turn the machine off to change a hard drive, etc. And there's no RAID. There's only yeah, there's really down to that, to be honest. I can't think, the performance is the same outside of that. Yeah. And we offer both. And there is also, I don't know, some of you may have seen the video I did, there is also a new IDS recorder. It's the X variant, which we are selling in the UK also, and we have stock of in DVS. The X variant is a strange hybrid machine. And when I say strange, it does perimeter detection, which we've just seen here, but it also does facial recognition. We only promote it towards facial recognition because the cost is higher on the X version compared to the same variant that only does perimeter detection. So if you went for the X version, whilst it can do facial recognition or perimeter detection, you would be price disadvantaged by using it for perimeter protection due to the cost increase. It's got new hardware for facial recognition, new algorithms, a new way of presenting itself. But for perimeter protection, we're still sticking with the core B line, purely down to cost. Okay, following up from that, are the devices particularly noisy? Do they have more fans than a standard NVR? And could they be placed in a quietish office? The 9000 series has bigger fans because it's a bigger unit. We have to draw more air through it compared to the 7000. The 9000 can be noisy, especially when it's doing a lot of workload, but that would be deployed in a rack generally. That's the main reason for 9000. So it would be out of the way and not really heard. The 7000, it depends on what you define as noisy. For me, I become quite dumb to that sort of noise because I've lived around it all my life. For somebody who isn't used to it, they may find that a problem. It isn't excessively noisy by any standard, but I'm definitely immune to it, like most of the guys who work here, because I'm always doing weird stuff on my desk with technology. So I think people become immune to that quite quickly. But it is probably noisier than a desktop PC that's got a fan in there, but not excessively noisy by any standard. But I would probably hide it out, or at least put it somewhere sort of the furthest point away possible that you can from anyone that could potentially complain. And that's all I can say. We rarely get complaints on fan noise now. We used to get a lot of complaints on fan noise, but very rarely now. And another side note to that, just to add to that, what you have to remember is if we took all of the fans out of our machine, which I'm not asking you to do because they're there for a reason, the hard drives themselves make a noise, so it adds to that noise. It's not just our fan, it's actually the hard drives. The more hard drives you have and the more workload they do, the faster they spin, the longer they spin, the more noise they create. So it isn't just our fan that makes a noise. There is hard drives that do make noise as well and contribute to that. Okay, hopefully that answers that one. Anything else?
Slightly off topic.
Slightly off topic.
Slightly off topic, but on the storage options.
Yes.
Someone mentioned there is a backup option. You know,
there is a backup option. You can do the auto backup function. I can show you that on I'm going to do a separate video on that. I'm going to set the machine up to do that separately to this because I don't have it set up to do it now. So it'd be a bit silly to go ahead and do that. But you can send it to like eSAR to a backup device effectively. We've never deployed it to my knowledge yet, but it is there if you need it. Some people like the hot spare mode where they put one NVR to cover multiple NVRs in the fault of failure rather than auto backup. But the auto backup function is there. But I plan on doing a separate how-to video on that to demonstrate it thoroughly rather than just quickly trying to bodge it together now, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah,
okay, is that all the questions answered? Well, hopefully you enjoyed the first webinar. Hopefully you took a lot from it. Be kind to me. It was the first one we did. We plan to do one sort of every few weeks with different technologies. And the way we're going to try and do is pick technologies that people are really struggling to buy into, understand, deploy, or getting the most problems with. And that's where most of our resources spend. So it helps us to help you to help your customer effectively. You will get tomorrow, you'll get an email thanking you for joining the webinar. If you can give any feedback on that, that would be absolutely fantastic. And hopefully you'll join us for another webinar very, very soon. And if you've got suggestions on what to do next, the next webinar, please do reply to that email from Zoom, and we will look to do that shortly. One more question before we go.
I assume these deep in mind NVRs can do perimeter and face recognition locally, no special camera. I think Dave said he would do face recognition next time.
I can do facial recognition next time, that's no problem. We don't need any special camera to do the deep in mind. On the X model, you're referring to the X model that does the perimeter face. You don't need a special camera to do either perimeter detection or facial recognition because it's on the chip. What you do, if you're going to use facial recognition, we urge you to use one of our facial recognition optimized cameras. The results are much better because of the way we send the event to the recorder, but it's not necessary. But we can do a separate video on that. Maybe that might be the next how-to video, is the facial recognition hybrid. Other than that, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of today and enjoy your weekend. Oh, we got another question coming in. Or is everyone just saying bye? Everyone's just saying bye. Thanks again and see you again and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks all.
Cheers, guys.